Welcome, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, in this glorious New England day. I hope that you are not going to really look through the window and regret that you have to be here, because you don't. Before I introduce our distinguished guest today, I would like to thank my friends and colleagues, Steven Ansola Becerra, Sebastian Rojo, and Jose Manuel Martinez Sierra, for launching this new study group at the Center for European Studies. This is much needed new forum for the discussion of Europe and global affairs. Too often in the past we were focusing on domestic affairs of different countries, and I think we need to do much more to understand a troubling fact: why EU, why Europe is not playing more important role in global affairs. And to help us to start thinking about that issue, I'm delighted to introduce to you Christos Stylianides. Christos Stylianides is the Commissioner for Human Aid and Crisis Management in the European Commission. He is also Ebola epidemic coordinator appointed by the European Council. He had distinguished political career. He was the elected member of the European Parliament. He was twice appointed the spokesman for the Republic of Cyprus. And he was the member of Cyprus Parliament for many years. And during his tenure over there, he was overseeing the Committee of Foreign and European Affairs and Committee of International Affairs and so on. So we are delighted to have someone with this breadth of experience, and we are delighted and honored to have you. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. And first of all, I would like to say that it's really great to be back at Harvard University. I still have precious memories from my time here 25 years ago. As a younger man without gray hair, I had an executive education program at the JFK School of Government, and it was an unforgettable and enriching experience. So it's great to be here with you at this very reputable Center for European Studies, CES. And as I realized in my discussion with my friends, it is a special moment for this center. For 50 years, this center has conducted innovative research on Europe, studied its history, our common history, trained scholars and experts, and along the way brought Americans and Europeans closer together. One of the most necessary missions, I think. So, congratulations for these 50 years of excellence. And thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you at the launch of the new Europe in the World seminar. It's a real honor for me. Thank you so much. And of course, special thanks to Director, Professor, I'm not sure about my good pronunciation, Sergio Ekian.
It is perfect. My first name is unpronounceable.
Thank you. Thank you for your tolerance. Of course, Executive Director Elaine Baboulias, my compatriot. Thank you so much. After a lot of years, we meet each other again. And of course, the Program Manager, Vasilis Koutifaris. Thank you so much for your kind invitation. It's really honor to me to be at this center, in this very family environment gathering, because for all of us who believe that the European project is something so necessary, I strongly believe that any such gatherings, speech or brainstorming or so on is really family gathering. Thank you so much for your presence here. So, what does it mean, Europe in the world? Professor already said that Europe is not really a powerful factor in the international developments. Give me the chance as European Commissioner and as a pro-European from my youth period to find some arguments in order to debate this approach. I think the academic environment is very good to have two different approaches to different ideas. So, Europe in the world, it sounds very abstract. But on the contrary, I believe it means Europe's strategic role in today's unpredictable and volatile world is really important. And I also believe it means Europe's commitment to our transatlantic bond, the bond between Europe and America. It means also Europe's role in tackling today's most pressing global challenges from Africa, Middle East, Venezuela, also climate change and multilateralism. Dear friends, today I would like to first focus why I consider the European Union an indispensable global actor. And especially through my experience as European Commissioner for Humanitarian Aid and Crisis Management. I spent the last 5 years, I think, with more than 1,500 visits on the ground across the world. I'm more or less pilot by profession, pilot by experience. A lot of time in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, in Middle East, of course. And I would like to share all these experiences with you. And I would like to have an exchange of views about the European role as a soft power, because this is very important for me to give to you this impression, what we said and what we believe that Europe is a soft power with power. Second, I would like to address why the bond between Europe and America is so important today more than ever. First point, the European Union as a global actor. I think we can agree on this. Today's global system is defined by complexity and uncertainty and more volatility than in recent history. We have moved away from the unipolar moment at the early 90s. I remember myself here at the government school. At that time, we talk about unipolar moment, completely different situation than now. And now we already enter to a multipolar distribution of power. I think it's a real distinction. We are more connected than ever before in human history, politically, economically, socially, and the big changer is communication methods, which are really faster and diverse. Social media. And no doubt that these global developments have many positive effects, but they also create new challenges. I would like to welcome dear Minister. Thank you for your presence here. Unilateralism is no longer a viable approach to address these challenges. Even a state as powerful as the United States cannot conquer the enormity of these problems alone. So here you can see that completely disagree with Trump administration, with Trump's speech 2 days ago in UNGA. And I'm ready to put my arguments on the table to discuss about this because I'm coming from Cyprus, I'm Greek Cypriot, and I know well the consequences of this nationalistic approach, especially in areas where we face crisis. In Europe, dear friends, dear colleagues, we have learned this approach through hard way, and we know that division and unilateralism only bring catastrophe. And it was very good debate between President Tusk and President Trump. We saw the two different dimensions about where we are going as Western world and also as transatlantic alliance. In Europe, we heard this and we experience through this hard way because of the repercussions of the World War II. And this is why they decided, our predecessors, to build the European Union as an adventurous, an ambitious idea just to secure the peace. And of course, to create common interests together in order to deal with new global challenges, even in 50s, 60s, just 10, 20 years after the Second World War. But I have to admit that recently our unity has been out to the test. First of all, due to financial crisis. In Greece, in Cyprus, in Ireland, in Portugal, in Spain, everywhere. The Eurozone crisis, yes, of course. At the same time, the refugee crisis, migration, I have to say that is really divided the European countries, especially Eastern European countries and Western European countries. Of course, Brexit, nobody can ignore the impact of this really very huge development about the European cohesion. But despite pessimistic predictions, and this is, I think, it could be a common ground between me and you, our union has proved resilient. The European project has shown resilience. And for me, this is very important. And just two pictures. Where is the chaotic situation now? Is in London or in Brussels or in Berlin or in Paris? If you compare these two pictures, I think obviously you can understand that in London there is a very unique problem in the British political system, maybe the first parliamentary system in the world. At the same time, if you compare British pound and euro, especially the rates between now and 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you can realize immediately that, yes, euro, the so-called weak currency, regardless of refugees crisis, financial crisis, Brexit, and many things, even Trump accusation that Europe is irrelevant and so on, we see that remains also resilient currency. So the project, I think, and it's a common ground, has shown its resilience, and this is very important, also for the ordinary people, for the European citizens. And this is why we managed to deal with this new populistic trend across Europe. Le Pen in France, similar parties in Netherlands, AfD in Germany, Austria, Orban, and in Poland, new state of play. But definitely there is a new momentum with some new influence from far-right parties, but we didn't see a real catastrophe of the mainstream political approach regarding political systems. So I think because our life is relatively comparable, so I can say that the project, yes, has shown real resilience against all these new threats. And also, I can argue that today the European Union is a vibrant, forward-looking global power, even as a soft power, founded on peace and solidarity, and definitely committed to a flexible multilateralism for the 21st century. And I try to demonstrate to you some EU's tools as a global actor, in particular through my experience as European Commissioner for Humanitarian Aid and Crisis Management. So, as a global power, the European Union deploys many tools to have a positive impact around the world. And starting with my field, I can say that the European Union, together with our member state, is the global leader in humanitarian and development aid. And frankly speaking, I'm really extremely proud of this, not only as European Commissioner, but as a European citizen. And if you see many opinion polls across Europe, in all of our member states, you can see that more than 90% of the European citizens, they support this really hard approach to see European Union remains as the biggest donor in humanitarian development field, with a lot of cost, because you have to pay money, especially during financial crisis. Not just as a philanthropic organization, but with systematic, specific, tangible results on the ground and with specific tools. So, I am proud also because these efforts are concrete examples of our European values and principles. And they come from our historical moral framework. And I would like to put on the table a specific example. In Venezuela now, I know very well as a really responsible commissioner for this very demanding field. Only through European funding and through our humanitarian partners, in principle framework, we can deliver humanitarian assistance inside Venezuela. And, frankly speaking, the American approach, Trump administration approach, already failed in humanitarian perspective. I know well because I visited the borders between Colombia and Venezuela, and I know well, even behind the scene, that only the European humanitarian assistance is going and is reaching vulnerable people, vulnerable children with vaccines, medicines, and so on. So for me, it is an evidence about the ability of this principle framework to reach vulnerable people and to be in really pragmatic approach regarding humanitarian assistance and development assistance. And where? In Latin America. Just, I wanted to say this an example that sometimes the pictures are not so realistic about the efficiency, the effectiveness of some policies. Also, last year, the European Union and its member states invested more than the rest of the world combined in humanitarian and development aid. More than half of the world's official development assistance. And especially in my field, in humanitarian aid alone, the European Union remains for many years the leading humanitarian donor. And definitely, I'm sure that we are committed to continuing this leadership. I'm leaving my office in the next month, 1st of November, but I'm sure the institutional approach, the institutional commitment remains so resilient about any criticisms, about any really different way of thinking. But no doubt that leadership comes with responsibility. So we are building concrete policies that alleviate suffering. This is our role. And lay the groundwork for peace, stability, and progress across the world. And here I would like to give you 3 telling examples, very tangible examples. First, one of the most really demanding policy, the EU-Turkey facility for refugees. Very demanding for obvious reasons. And because of some controversial aspects of this agreement, which 3-4 years ago, when we started to implement this agreement, we faced through our humanitarian partners, some NGOs and others, about some aspects of this agreement. But if you evaluate the results of this agreement, you can realize that this agreement was the most important pillar in order to deal the refugee crisis, especially from Syria, from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Pakistan, and so on. So, one big dilemma in this. And this is also part of our flexibility and you can make this comparison between Venezuela and Turkey. So through our pragmatism, through our pragmatic way as European, we manage to avoid more problem about our cohesion inside our institutions because of this debate between East and West Europe about the resettlement and relocation and some other different policies to deal with the refugee crisis. But at the same time, we managed to support Turkey. We managed to alleviate the suffering of the people, vulnerable people, and of course to give prospects and hope, especially to the children, to you, the new generation. And even now, I'm going to Turkey in the next 2-3 weeks because we continue to work closely with Turkey to tackle all the challenges because of this refugee crisis. And for me, most importantly, we managed to save lives. All of you, especially some of you from Greece, from Cyprus, you remember this painful picture of this very small baby in the Turkish shores. It was, I cannot describe this picture. So now, in the last 3 years, we managed to avoid new similar picture. And this is really the impact of EU-Turkey facility and the implementation of this really controversial agreement. So, as European Union, as soft power, regardless of our inside disagreements, because of some policies, resettlement and relocation, we manage to deal with this problem with a very high level positive impact also to refugees communities, to host communities, Turkey, and of course to our communities, even in Greek islands, Lesbos, Chios, Leros, with a lot of problems, definitely. But if we compare the situation 3-4 years ago, I think it's really positive sign about the results of this policy of this agreement between EU and Turkey. But here, I would like to focus on some educational projects. As I said many times, I have a positive obsession. In our life, we need some positive obsessions. It's a part of our natural attitude, I think. Education in emergencies. From the beginning of my mandate, facing some bureaucratic obstacles, I managed to increase our budget for education emergencies 10 times. And in Turkey, when we implemented our flagship, we saw very important results about this approach to connect cultural voucher scheme for refugees and education for their children. It was, for me, even amazing project, and now already became a role model in all humanitarian activities on the ground to connect the dignity of the refugees' family with hope to their children. And in Turkey, it is and it was our flagship project in this combination. I would like to continue in this field, education emergencies, because it's not only the definition of the so-called nexus between development and humanitarian aid in our European policies, but because it's going beyond the traditional approach about humanitarian assistance. And I want to talk about Iraq. I want to talk about Mosul. I think it is a real common ground that education in emergencies is a shield that protects children from the dangers of war, radicalization, forced recruitment, criminal groups, and so on and so on. In Iraq, we are bringing education to children from diverse ethnic and religious backgrounds. Muslims and Christians learn together, kick the football together, learn tolerance together as a part of their everyday lives. I've seen this in many countries. When you build a school, you build tolerance, reconciliation, and peace. Last February, I visited Mosul. I met children studying at EU-funded schools where not long before, Daesh was teaching a curriculum of war and hate in the same schools, in the same places. Just 3 months, 2-3 months after the liberation. And today, these same children are learning about peace and coexistence instead of hate and this radical approach. And I think, and this is the new aspect about our approach as humanitarian actor on the ground, as EU policy way of thinking, education has become a vehicle for reconciliation. So, without to ignore our principle framework, humanitarian principles, neutrality, impartiality, independence, humanity, we saw on the ground through some projects that, yes, especially educational emergencies could be a vehicle for reconciliation, especially in countries, in Mosul, with a lot of different ethnic and religious groups. I want also to say a few words about another critical issue. Professor, in his introduction about me, he said that I'm the Ebola coordinator of the European Union, and I remain until the end of my mandate. But I would like to talk with you my experiences, especially 5 years ago in West Africa, in the 3 affected countries, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, when, unfortunately, the international system, and especially WHO, was really collapsed, and we were with a lot of weaknesses to deal with such epidemics, which were very close to pandemic. If you remember that period, we had 3,000 victims per day. Okay, Philippus, you are yeah. So at that time, I was appointed as coordinator November 2014. I visited immediately the 3 affected countries, and the European Union really helped the World Health Organization and other partners to address this outbreak with efficient way. And even now in DRC, where we face a new outbreak, the European Union is leading efforts to reform the World Health Organization because it's the only way to deal with such epidemics in the future. And of course, our common purpose is to make such international organizations fit for purpose for the 21st century. Another example is the European Union as a global mediator. European citizens support a strong EU role in the world, a Europe that is engaged with the world, that cooperates with our partners, such as, in particular, the United States, to solve problems, to find solutions to climate change, global and regional security, from the Middle East to Latin America. The European Union wants to address this issue head-on with international partners through openness and compromise. 3 examples where the European Union has worked for compromise on big issues. Climate change. For Europeans, climate change is real, is not fake news, totally, because the science is clear and it cannot be denied. The gravity of the situation became very clear during the UN Climate Action Summit a few days ago during UNCA. I just came from UNCA and I smelled the political climate there. And all interlocutors and speakers, they agreed that as a result of climate change, catastrophic natural phenomena have increased dramatically and devastating parts of Europe and, of course, United States, California, Texas, Florida, you see. And if you compare the new phenomena and the different work about the consequences of climate change. Europeans understand this hard reality, and Americans too, and of course demand immediate action. Immediate action on an issue that threatens our collective future. We talk about our planet. And that's why the European Union helped broker and adopt the Paris Agreement with our American partners, Obama administration. We reached a compromise. And now we're working to implement the Paris Agreement, maybe the last chance for all of us, for the planet. Admittedly, we have serious disagreements with the Trump administration on this issue, and regret President Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. But the European Union remains firmly committed, and we will work with our partners to implement the agreement. No doubt that we are ready to hear new ideas and to find new compromises. But we have to follow the scientific figures. We cannot deny them. We cannot ignore the science in this very scientific issue. And all scientists everywhere, it's, you can find very few of them to deny about the repercussion of climate change and what do we have to do. So it's easy, first of all, to understand and to agree on this scientific background, and then, of course, we can see the transition phase, we can see some aspects which are being under new compromise instead of Paris Agreement aspects. But first of all, we have to find the common ground about the consequences of the climate change. Another example in which European Union make a difference as a global soft power. The Iran deal. I know that is very controversial. It's not an easygoing deal. But the Iranian nuclear deal was the result of long and complex negotiations and the political will of all parties, the US included, a shared commitment. The European Union invested a lot in this process, helped facilitate the final agreement, build bridges, and find a compromise, a necessary compromise. In short, the EU's credibility helped make the Iranian nuclear deal possible, a significant step forward peace and stability in the Middle East due to Iranian deal, and now the new negative development in Yemen and inside Syria. I think maybe it is an outcome of this new state of play due to non-Iranian deal. And because of my engagement in this region, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan, also inside Iran, I can say that we have to find as soon as possible new ways in order to continue our negotiations with Iranians. Otherwise, we will see really more negative impact in the Middle East because of the absence of any deal with Iranians. I don't want to say more about Venezuela. For me, it's a very critical example about our ability to provide humanitarian assistance in a very difficult situation through principle framework assistance and without any political engagement in this area. My last point about European Union as a critical and important soft power is Africa. Dear friends, I believe Africa is the challenge of our generation. Not only for Europe and not only for the United States, but the entire international community. Today, African countries are battling many serious challenges from conflict, poverty, bad governance, non-governance, corruption, and forced displacement. On top of this, Africa is experiencing a demographic explosion, what some are calling a ticking time bomb. Just two figures. Nigeria now has a population 180 million people, and in 30 years, Nigeria will have similar population as the whole European Union, around 500 million people. Today, Africa as a whole has over 1 billion, and by 2050, it's expected to reach 2.5 billion in 30 years. So, I strongly believe that European Union and US must address these challenges together. We are in the same boat. And as European Union, we establish new policies and new trust funds and so on to face this problem. But through my experience as commissioner, I don't believe we should see Africa as a continent of problems. Africa has incredible potential that can only be achieved through partnership between governments, global institutions, and of course, business, private sector. I've met African leaders, entrepreneurs, and young people building an exciting future for their countries and their continent, and the European Union always stands firmly behind them. A very obvious example is Rwanda, with a lot of funding by the European Union, by the USA, and I think we can continue our collaboration in this way in order to overcome this traditional approach about Africa, which is based on the one side of the coin in a philanthropic approach and in some extent in a sort of post-colonial complex. I think we can see Africa as a partnership between equals, and I believe Africa is ready to play a transformative role in the global economy. But investment is only one side of the coin. The other is good governance, the rule of law, fighting corruption, and I think without this, it's possible for Africa to attract much needed foreign investment. And of course, just a few words, I strongly believe that for Africa, the most appropriate approach is a PPP, private-public partnership. It's the only way to deal with corruption and non-governance. And of course, we need the injection by the private sector in order to see real reforms in many African political systems. And few words about the role of education emergencies in our dealing with demographic explosion. In some discussions, even within my political group, EPP in Europe, when I raised this issue about the demographic explosion, some people, they remains and they are against because of their religious approach. They don't want to speak about demography. Your origin country, some of MEPs, Christos, why? You put on the table, this is completely out of our culture and so on. No, I never propose Chinese family planning. For me, it's really unacceptable. But when and where we know that due to early marriages, forced marriages, the average age for the first marriage is around 13, 14 years old for the girls, I think it's also unacceptable for us. And I believe through education emergencies, especially when we focus on girls' education, we can see this first marriage average age. So we have to respect the culture of the people, especially the local. And it was, frankly speaking, one of the reasons why I decided to take this decision and to increase our budget 10 times for education emergencies. Last but not least, EU transatlantic relations. I've always been a strong believer in our transatlantic bond, and that has not changed. My dear colleagues knows well that in Cyprus, I have the nickname that very pro-Western politician. Yes, why not? And since the end of World War II, the United States has invested in a peaceful and prosperous Europe, Marshall Plan. Yes. And NATO, of course, created a strong security anchor to defend the Western world. Europeans are forever grateful. But our transatlantic bond goes well beyond security. To our common values, shared values, principles, and interests, anchored in our shared history. I believe the EU-US partnership is indispensable for addressing today's global challenges because the European Union and the US complement each other, strengthen each other. Stated simply, I believe the world is a better place when the European Union and US stand shoulder to shoulder. But when our cooperation fails, our common interests suffer and benefits those who would challenge the rules-based international order. This is the big challenge. This is a big problem. Transatlantic divides always make headlines, but what unites us is far greater than what divides us. I think let's never forget that. And I said this argument in my meetings during UNCA this week with some American officials. So now is the time to re-energize our EU-US partnership because we face so many common challenges: climate change, the future of Africa, and preserving a multilateral global governance. I would like to say a few words about multilateralism. Defending and deepening the multilateral global governance must be a strategic priority for the European Union and for the US. This is essential to secure peace and stability. We have a shared interest to safeguard a multilateral world order to prevent chaos and disorder. And the European Union is taking steps to strengthen multilateralism. We are reforming multilateralism by strongly supporting the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' reform agenda from the beginning, with a lot of accusation even among some of our member states. We are investing in and implementing multilateralism by stepping up our funding to the UN system and facilitating international agreements like the Paris Agreement and also Iran deal. This is my personal conviction about this. We are deepening multilateralism by pursuing ambitious political and trade agreements like with Canada, Japan, Mercosur, and others. And this is why we insist to see an agreement with USA, trade agreement, difficult agreement, especially with the new change in Washington. We started in a very good mood with Obama administration, but unfortunately everything went back because of the new, of a different approach about trade agreements with Trump administration. And of course, we are creating multilateralism by promoting a partnership approach to migration and on refugees. And just recently, we saw the value of multilateralism when countries came together to help protect the Amazon rainforest from massive fires. These are areas where the European Union and the US have shared interests and can find really common ground. I think I already spent my time, yes, just to conclude. 3 points. Number one, a robust EU-US relationship, I strongly believe that is a safety net for peace and stability. Number two, Despite our differences, we should never forget Europe and America form a community of shared values we can unite around. Number 3, I believe that this is our destiny and our duty to our common history and, of course, to the world. Thank you so much for your attention.